Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Diana Hernandez, Program Director of the Monuments Toolkit at World Heritage USA, ICOMOS USA, and I'm so glad you are here. We're gathering today in the spirit of Women's History Month to celebrate, uplift, and bear witness to the women who have been doing this work, often without recognition, often without resources, but always with everything they have. I have the privilege today of being in conversation with three women who are doing the work of historic preservation loudly, strategically, and on their own terms. Let me introduce them to you. Dr. Georgette Grier-Key is an internationally recognized historian, educator, advocate, and cultural leader whose mission is powerfully focused on aligning government, nonprofits, business, and community to foster an inclusive and accurate historical narrative. She is an avid practitioner of grounded theory and sustainability models, utilizing these approaches to actively disrupt the agenda of traditional frameworks that have long upheld institutional and structural exclusion. Dr. Grier-Key is the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Eastville Community Historical Society and a leading figure in civil rights as the President of the NAACP Brookhaven Town Branch and the Long Island Regional Director for the New York State NAACP Conference. She was the first Black board president of the Museum Association of New York, serves as a New York State 250th Commemoration Commissioner, and is Vice President of the Women's Rights Alliance of New York State. She's also a professor at Medgar Evers College, specializing in African American history and culture and the modern civil rights movement. Dr. Grier-Key is one of the most outspoken advocates using and teaching cultural competence to illuminate marginalized histories. She is a principal organizer of Amistad Week in Montauk, spearheaded the East Hampton Town Board's unanimous designation of August 26th as Amistad Day, and as a founding member and lead organizer of the Paris Concert Action Committee. She's leading the effort to rebuild the formerly enslaved Paris Concert's homestead in the heart of Southampton Village, and a powerful and enduring commitment to historical justice and remembrance. Next, our speaker, Sehila Mota Casper, is a leading historic preservationist and heritage conservationist committed to fostering inclusivity and equity in the field. As the inaugural executive director of Latinos and Heritage Conservation, a national nonprofit, she champions the preservation of Latinx places, stories, and cultural heritage across the U.S. At LHC, Mota Casper has secured significant funding, including a transformative $4 million grant from the Mellon Foundation, supporting the first ever Latinx preservation granting program, the expansion of the Abuelas Project, and a vital Latinx preservation toolkit for the Borderlands region. Before LHC, Mota Casper was a senior field officer for the National Trust for Historic Preservation, directing projects in Houston, Texas. She holds a Master of Fine Arts in Historic Preservation from the Savannah College of Art and Design, where her pioneering thesis was the first in the U.S. to directly address the systemic underrepresentation of Latinx heritage in national historic preservation. And last but not least, Izel Lopez from Atascosa, Texas. She serves as the Deputy Director of the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. She is a proud member of the Tapilam Coahuiltecan Nation and a descendant of the Lipan Apache. A Southern cloth dancer and active member of the powwow community for more than 25 years, her work is rooted in cultural preservation and community wellness. Itzel has held leadership roles with the American Indians of Texas at the Spanish colonial missions and serves as vice chair of the Yanaguanatapilam Native American Church. She earned her degree in Native American Studies from the University of the Incarnate Word and continues to study history and genealogy to honor her ancestor stories. Together with her husband and children, she practices sustainable farming that blends historical and traditional values with modern approaches, with the hope of inspiring others to build healthy food systems and carry Native traditions forward for generations to come. Welcome. Before we go further, I want to take a moment to acknowledge something that has been in the air lately. We are living through a reckoning, one that is painful precisely because it is not coming from outside our movements. It is coming from within. It has recently come to light that Dolores Huerta, along with several survivors who helped propel farm worker rights and the Chicano civil rights movement, have been silenced for decades, convinced that their pain was a price worth paying for the greater good. That is not an accident. That is a structure, one that protects legacy over people, that asks women and children to keep giving their labor, their silence, their bodies, while movements absorb the credit and men absorb the protection. One of the central problems is that our movements too often reduce histories of collective struggle to romanticize stories of individual men. And when we organize ourselves around those men rather than our own values, we risk reproducing the very logics we set out to dismantle. Patriarchal systems of oppression that ultimately protect those with power rather than those who are oppressed. A movement can do historic good and still perpetuate harm at the same time. Both of those things can be true. And when we refuse to hold both for the quote unquote greater good, we guarantee the silencing and the trauma repeat generation after generation. This is exactly why the work we are doing today matters, not as a response to one man's legacy, but as an answer to a structure that has always been there. The women in this conversation have been building, protecting, and carrying their communities forward, centering the knowledge, the leadership, and the living memory that official histories have always left out. That is not incidental to liberation. That is what liberation actually looks like. So before we go into our discussion, I want to open the floor for a moment in case any of our speakers would like to add a word.
Thank you, Diana. This is just so timely, and I'm grateful that Iconless USA, World Heritage USA is speaking about this in a timely manner. At Latinos and Heritage Conservation, we're committed to preserving history with accuracy and care and dignity. And that really is centered on telling the human experience, telling the full story without erasure, without simplification, and understanding that the heritage work that we do requires us to hold integrity in our storytelling and community at the same time. I also want to stress that we can honor the movement of the farm worker movement while remaining clear about accountability and continue the work that farm workers are still carrying forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, I would love for each of our speakers to take us into their work. We will give each of you several minutes to bring us into what you are doing and why it matters. Georgette, I would love to start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Georgette Grier-Key, and I'm the Executive Director of Eastville Community Historical Society. And when we talk about Eastville, we're talking about a triple threat of heritage, a place where African Americans, Indigenous, and European immigrant stories didn't just coexist, they intertwined. I don't just study the history, I live in the house it built. I walk in the cemetery where ancestors rest, and I work in the shadows and the structures that raised them when they could not be acknowledged. The ancestors said, "We do belong." And so happy Women's History Month, everyone. And I am the daughter of many mothers. And so this image is of some of the mothers that have been in my life. And unfortunately, some are not in this slide. But I stand on the shoulder of giants and women who had the tenacity to exist and survive. Next slide. And so Eastville for so long defied the logic of what we consider to be historic preservation. We were founded because the historic district stopped a block before Eastville Avenue is where the St. David AME Zion Church exists on its original footprint and is the oldest church in Sag Harbor. And so far too long, the field of historic preservation has treated preservation as if it was a luxury hobby and not really concerned about the people that make the preservation possible, the stories of the people. And it's not always just a brick and mortar. So we have been trained from historical and traditional architectural to look past structures that you see on this actual slide. But our history is in the hush harbors. It's in the shotgun houses, the juke joints, the one-room schoolhouses, and it is significantly social, political, and economic. And when we look at the strategies that employed the civil rights movement, this is how it happened. So at Eastville, we believe preservation isn't just about holding on to our past. It's about cultural survival. It's about making sure the heartbeat of our ancestors remain, and that we look at structural reckoning, that it's not just about the actual buildings, but about the people. And let's be real about where we stand. In the National Register of over 95,000 sites, right, there really is roughly only about 3% that represents the BIPOC community. And that isn't a gap, it's a structural erasure. Next slide, please. And so when we think about how we survive in spaces, this is an image of the Amistad in Montauk, Long Island, New York, where it actually ran aground. We preserve that history. The Southampton African American Museum, the Montauk Historical Society, and Eastville Community Historical Society, along with our town of East Hampton, fight to make sure that this history is place-based and people are actually able to walk there and feel the actual ground, the sand, and be in that place of hollow ground. Next slide. And then we look at another time period that we work on very specifically. This is Pyrrhus Concert. And so we look at the period from Northern enslavement to sovereignty and how that looks, even in the historic preservation world. Behind me in the yellow hat is the original timbers of a house that was demolished after 3 years of fighting. And my co-partner here is Brenda Simmons from the Southampton African American Museum. We have been fighting to rebuild the historic Piercer site, the homestead. And there's a lot more you can learn about that, but we don't have time for that. Next slide. Thinking about Pyrrhus Concert, he was a person of significance. He defied the odds, and he's in between what we call enslavement and the gradual emancipation. His house here is in that picture. It was stated that, oh, we don't know anything about him. And they did know about his history, and they still tore the house down. But we've been able to collect significant evidence of his existence and the fact that he too belongs in Southampton, New York. Next slide. This is just more documentation of his house directly across the street where you see the anchor. That was there when they tore the house down. The cemetery stone that is there was always there. And so for them to deny even knowing in his existence, we had to pull up primary evidence and research. And we've been in the plans to reconstruct his site, as you see there, the plans that have been drawn that are being denied by our village government. We are still fighting for his life. He is a testament to Northern slavery. We always say that you don't have to go to South to understand slavery. It was in the North very prominently. Next slide. These are the timbers that you saw in the truck that we had to see if we can rebuild part of his house back. And that's me there all the way babying the timbers to make sure that we're able to rebuild it. On these timbers, they date back to colonial era. They have hand-hewed numbers on them, just like a puzzle. And so when you think about historic preservation, our ordinance in the village says that you only can look from the street view. We had to go a little bit further to convince them of this actual structure being significant. And we were able to go in and find these timbers and find the hand-hewn numbers on the hand-hewn timbers, find the Roman numbers that were etched in. to show and preserve this heritage, we had to go through a lot. And part of it was being able to retrieve these timbers after the house was demolished, during and after. Next slide. So we fought for a long time. We made sure that this house and this land is preserved, so the land is landmarked. We actually was able to rename the street to Concert's Way, rather than the prominent Pond Lane that was there, even though that name still exists. But Concert is going to have his way, and we are continuing to fight because this place matters. It matters for many reasons, and we continue to fight. Next slide. This is another project that I've been working on. The Sands community, Sands Sag Harbor, is one of the communities. If you think about the Green Book, it was developed in a time where there was segregation and active KKK on Long Island. There were no major highways, and there was a long route from the city out to the Hamptons. And these people that are here are people who created it and their ancestors. These is people who wanted to have access to respite. They wanted to be able to swim in the water and not have acid thrown in the pool because you swam in it. They wanted to be in a community where you said good morning and their doors could be open. So the Sands community is a significant community that still exists, that has beachfront property. That has come under attack and have been under threat of developers wanting to actually go after the land for their mooring rights, as well as just be able to have access to the beaches that are deeded on their properties. So SAND stands for Sag Harbor Hills, Azarest, Nineveh, and subdivisions. You can go to the next slide. And this is a part of American history and an American movement. There have been many beaches across this nation that particularly have been Black. And at this time, I believe that only 3 currently exist. And many of these beaches and communities have been in the Green Book. Next slide. This is Azarest, circa 1947. Next slide. This is Sag Harbor Hills, 1950. Next slide. This is Nineveh, 1952. And these communities are significant because if you know anything about the civil rights bills and fair housing bills, you'll know that these all predate 1968, right? And we look at that Act of Fair Housing that wasn't included. And so how did these people during this time build these homes in these communities and didn't have access to sometimes banking, didn't have access sometimes to mortgages, and also discrimination in terms of building materials. So they have done significant work in the community, even sending a bus to the March on Washington for Jobs and Justice from the beach. Next slide. That's the end of my slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grier-Key. Sehila, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Sehila Mota Casper, and I'm the Executive Director of Latinos and Heritage Conservation. We are the national nonprofit leading and advocating for the inclusion of Latinx heritage within historic preservation. We are an intergenerational group. We work throughout the United States and all work to affirm the value of our history and the hemispheric struggle for social justice. Latinos and Heritage Conservation, which we lovingly call LHC, was founded in 2014. So we are a new and nascent group, but a group of practitioners that have been working throughout the country solely focused on Latinx heritage. Our mission is to build a movement that affirms Latinx heritage through education, conservation, and leadership development. Our vision is a just world that values Latinx heritage, people, and places. And so what I want to share with you today is exactly what Dr. Grier-Key said about the under 3% of sites that are listed in the National Register reflect that of Latinx and BIPOC accessible and LGBTQIA communities. And we see the same within the Latinos and our heritage and how that's preserved or not preserved within the United States. For so long, the rich mosaic of Latinx history and heritage has been relegated to the margins within the traditional field of historic preservation. And that's with even Latinxes being the largest and the oldest ethnic group within the country. What we found through some of my early studies beginning in 2012 up until the LHC equity study that was just published last year, we found that it continues to be that less than 1% of Latinx sites are listed in the National Register that are associated with Latinx history. So this really leads to real world consequences. It leaves Latinx communities vulnerable to disinvestment, to displacement, and just to overall erasure of our cultural heritage. And because of that, Latinx preservation has really taken a stronghold over the last decade of what is going on through a lot of the leadership work that's happening at the grassroots and local communities through incredible leaders, including those throughout the borderlands, such as Esperanza Peace and Justice Center out of San Antonio, such as Chicano Park in San Diego. Numerous individuals are leading this work locally, and we are just one of the organizations that focuses on this. Latinos and Heritage Conservation, or LHC, we have created multiple initiatives that are solution oriented due to this disparity, due to all of the systemic issues that we see that come down from working in a traditional framework that wasn't made for us. One of the things that we created is called the Abuelas Project. And the Abuelas Project is a digital community archive. It is crowdsourced, and we go throughout the country. We collect stories. We collect oral history stories. We collect old photos. We digitize them, and we utilize a GIS product to storytell in a very human-centered way. I'm really excited to share that the Abuelas Project, we launched the pilot in Texas 4 years ago and are now working and expanding out throughout the borderlands. And we now have representation of all of the states throughout the borderlands. And what we do with the Abuelas Project is that we really encourage intergenerational storytelling. And we use this and we lovingly call it the Abuelas Project because it pays homage to nuestra abuelas, or the grandmothers that have been the culture bearers and keepers of our history since the beginning of millennia. We also utilize the Abuelas Project to do things like geographic mapping. We do educational workshops, and we utilize it for collecting those stories, one for community to have so that way we can be seen and validated, but also on the flip side of that, for us as practitioners to use it as a site identification tool so that way then we can better preserve the sites and stories that matter most to Latinx communities and barrios throughout the country. LHC has also created the Latinx Preservation Toolkit. It's a bilingual toolkit. It gives a 101 on what historic preservation is. It demystifies it. It takes out all of the jargon that we are taught to use within our language. It strips all of that away. It's in both English and in Spanish. It's culturally competent, and we utilize it throughout the country to not only engage with local communities and historic barrios, to do free community workshops on how they can then become the leaders of preservation in their own practice within their own historic communities or cities, but then also to use it to help CLGs and SHPOs then to learn how to be more culturally competent in the work that they are doing, again, to do better capacity building for those practicing in the field who don't know how to work with Latinx communities, or for communities that are utilizing this work then to push forward and advocate to save their own spaces. Latinos and Heritage Conservation, as you heard, launched the Nuestra Herencia grant program, and we launched that in 2024. It was incredible. We provided over $600,000 for Latinx heritage projects throughout the United States. Although I will share that that same year, we had almost 1.5 million in requests. This year, we're currently undergoing and vetting all of our applications that just recently closed, and we are at a nearly ask of $4 million in request with only $600,000 to give to communities throughout the country. So we know that the need is there. Latinos and Heritage Conservation also launched the very first endangered landmarks program for Latinx heritage sites. It's called the Endangered Latinx Landmarks. We are currently accepting nominations for it, so please check us out. I will drop our website once here when I'm done. The other thing that we absolutely advocate for is the inclusion of scholars and young individuals or older individuals that are new to this field. We have the SAMIA Scholars Program, and it's a fellowship program for graduate students that are working in similar fields to historic preservation. We know that this practice is very interdisciplinary, so we have fellows that come to us from GIS backgrounds, geology backgrounds, architectural backgrounds, public history, planning, architectural. So if you know of a Latinx scholar that is looking for practical ways and solutions and to fill up their resume and to learn more, please send them our way for the SAMIA Scholars program. And then our key event is coming up in August of 2026. We will have our 8th national conference on Latinx heritage. It is the only national conference that's solely focused on Latinx heritage. We have been in Denver, we've been in San Diego, we've been in Providence, and this year we will be in Chicago in the Midwest, which we are very excited about to help preserve a lot of the sites and stories and elevate the great work that community is doing there. We invite all of you to come and join us, come and listen and learn from Latinx communities on how they are working and really preserving the spaces and places that are sacred to them. And as I often say, they're doing this work. They just don't call it historic preservation, but they're doing this work. And I can't wait to share more with you all throughout this discussion. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sehila. Izel?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Izel Lopez, and I'm the Deputy Director with the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. And I'm going to apologize in advance in case you see me turn off my camera. At any time, we are in a rural area, and I am showing that I have low bandwidth on my Zoom right now. So in case I disappear, that's what it is. I'm just trying to make sure I don't get cut off. But thank y'all for having me here with you today. And thank y'all for joining us. Here at Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, our mission is to rematriate the buffalo to their traditional homelands in Texas and reconnect our buffalo relatives to Texas Indigenous lineal descendants. And so what that means is building back those relationships that have been lost throughout time. Buffalo were a main staple here in Texas, and the corridor that led from the northern Great Plains, is a buffalo corridor that led from the northern Great Plains down into north and northeastern Mexico. San Antonio served as one of those thoroughfares on that buffalo corridor. And so with the loss of the buffalo, there was also a great loss in our culture and our traditions, as the buffalo were our main sustenance for survival. So as some of you may have heard throughout history, erase the buffalo, erase the man, which is what took place all throughout the United States, North America, Central America, South America, and also here in Texas. And so one of our main goals is to be able to reconnect the bison or buffalo, we use the term interchangeably, to our Native American and Indigenous nations, tribes, and bands here in Texas. And so we do that with support from the Tapilam Coiltecan tribes, also through the Liban Apache, and through various other nations and tribes that we've partnered with. So next slide, please. Some of the projects and programs that we work towards in order to be able to reconnect our culture and our traditions is food sovereignty. As many of you, I'm sure, know and have experienced, it is food that brings people together in conversation, and also gives us an avenue to be able to learn other traditions, learn from others, learn about different cultures. So through food sovereignty, some of the programs that we have are Farm to School, where we're able to provide our grass-fed, sustainably and regeneratively raised bison meat to local students to be able to provide them a healthy meal. We also have a program, Meat for Mamas, that supports pregnant, expecting mothers, and also mothers who have young children, and we're able to provide them with meat on a monthly basis, and also be able to provide them with workshops tailored to finding healthy, nutritious ways to be able to feed their families. We also support in our local area, and we also sell our bison meat on a platform called Grown By, which allows us to be able to get our bison meat out into the general public on a nationwide level. So we do ship within the United States. Some of our programs that we have to be able to make those historical connections back to our community members through community engagement is, for one, is our Buffalo Harvest, in which we have a group of elders and also some other bison ranchers from local, or not local, but our local area, but they also come in from reservations here in the United States. And they come in to teach our community the importance of bison, the importance of harvesting the bison as a community. We all get to do some hands-on there. And then also the importance of being able to work together as a community to be able to provide that bison meat back to our community members. We've also started working on a Indigenous DNA project to make a connection for those relatives through time that have lost their connection to their cultures and their traditions, their Native American Indigenous culture and traditions. Here in Texas and South Texas especially, a lot of people are finding out that their ancestors and their relatives were part of the mission systems. And so through time, they were assimilated into a different culture, which would have been the Hispanic culture. And so they've lost that connection. And so we are finding ways to be able to reconnect them back to the history and back to their family and their relatives. I'm happy to say that ourselves here as a team at Texas Tribal Buffalo Project have actually been able to make those connections within the team, where we've actually been able to connect with long lost cousins, genetic cousins as well, that we did not know, that we had that relationship. So we also do ranch tours here as well, where we're able to bring in community members to be able to spend time and see the bison and be able to learn more about them and their contributions, not only to our culture and our traditions, but also to the ecosystem. Bison are much different than our livestock that we are used to, such as cattle. And so they themselves have their own way of regenerating the land without needing any help. Ranchers have different ways, different programs, and different tools that they use to regenerate the land, whether it be no-till system or replanting native prairie grasses. Bison have the ability to do that naturally without any of those extra tools that we humans have to use. So another part of our programming is in developing a curriculum that we're able to utilize within the Texas school systems, and then a curriculum that we are also able to use through 4-H and FFA programs. Right now, we received the A&A grant, and so we're in the process of building a processing unit at our ranch in Floresville, which is a 150-acre ranch that was acquired through a land back campaign and is being held under a conservation easement through the Conservation Fund here in Texas. So that processing unit is going to be one of two within the state of Texas that will be able to process bison. They did have several others. Unfortunately, they did close down. And so right now there is only one processing unit. And so it's very important that our fellow bison ranchers have that ability to be able to also get that meat out into the community. So we're very happy and very proud to say that we will be one of those two here within the near future. So, and then we also have a youth camp that we hold yearly, and we're able to bring in some of our Lipan, Apache, and Huahuiltecan elders, and they come in and they share space with about 20 youth, and they do storytelling. We also teach traditions as archery. And then also we have a small butcher class where our students are able to come in and share in that knowledge and being able to butcher a small rabbit. And they leave with a sense of empowerment to know that they are learning how to be able to, at some point, be able to sustain themselves just off of the land alone. We also offer curriculum on seeds in the Three Sisters Gardens and on teaching them different traditional recipes and things like that. So that is another program that we have here at Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. So, but our main goal is to be able to make that connection and be able to connect our people, our community members, back to the culture and to those traditions that have been long lost for some of them and for many of them for decades. So yeah, that's a little bit about what we do here. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Izel. Thank you all for your introductions. And now I'm going to ask y'all a general question that y'all can each address. So how do you define historic preservation in a way that reflects your community's values rather than the field's traditional frameworks? Preservation as a field has historically been defined by what gets listed, registered, and funded, but many of the things your communities are protecting don't fit that framework. So how do you define it on your own terms?
I'll jump in.
Sorry, go ahead, Sina.
Okay, are you sure? Okay, thank you. At Latinos and Heritage Conservation, we really center on what we call community-led preservation, where community leads, and all of that is centered in Latinidad and cultura. So without having culture and Latinidad within the framework and our indigeneity within the framework that we do, then we would not be able to do our work. So for us, we center the definition of historic preservation on community and what it is that's most important to them. In the language of historic preservation, that mainly means that we center a lot of our work, even place, even buildings, through intangible heritage. And you can't have one without the other. So we don't use the formal definition or the 50-year rule at all within LHC. We actually allow the terminology and the definition of historic preservation to evolve as we evolve within our own communities.
So for Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, one of the projects that we've led has been a data sovereignty project, where it was a survey that we put out to our communities within the northern states of Mexico and also here in Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. And so we were able to collect that information to be able to develop some of our programs according to the needs of the community. So through that and the programs that we developed, which for example is one is a buffalo harvest, we have that yearly. And so that project, it ties everyone back into what was a big part of our culture and our tradition. As I had mentioned before, the buffalo sustained us in every way. It wasn't just our shelter, it was also our clothing, it was our tools, and it was part of our foodways. So the buffalo wasn't able just to feed one person or one family, it was able to feed the entire community. And so it's being able to teach that and also being able to teach sovereignty within other tribes and nations here in Texas and throughout the United States, that we're able to capture and preserve those traditions, and then also being able to learn from others, as we do have a lost history here in South Texas, being assimilated into a different culture for over 250 years in some instances. It takes a little bit more time for us to be able to make that connection, or I guess realize that connection. Sometimes we do have to reflect back into history, and it's a history that wasn't written by us, but a history that was written by others. So that can be kind of difficult to navigate, but through our oral history, which is another project that we did have, our oral history, and being able to engage with those other community members that have some of that history and that are the keepers of their families' histories, we're able to make that connection again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what my colleagues said here has resonated with me. And a lot, when I think about what preservation is to us, it goes back to the fact that our ancestors, many of them have been brought over as involuntary immigrants, brought over in chains, and the fact that, our history didn't start with slavery. Our history started long before slavery. And knowing that we come from a culture that created, a lot of the history and culture in this country, from our music, from our storytelling, from our foodways. And so understanding that we come from an extended family mindset where we've had to make families on plantations. So everybody's an auntie, everyone's respected, the elders. And we still have that today. Like today, on this call, I have to give a shout out to many of my board members, Robin, Brown, Marvin. I also have Nicole Jean on this call, Yolana, Harriet, as well as Nicole Nichols. So we too subscribe to community. And our title is Eastville Community Historical Society. And one of the elders who no longer is with us, Bill Pickens, used to say, it's unity in community. And so we take our model from community, but we also believe in holding space and taking up place. And so it is the tangible buildings that we do look at, but it is also the land that our free labor actually toiled and built. It is the systems that we help create, but never given the acknowledgement. It is the spaces that we are interred, that some places where we were never given dignity, our churches where we were able to stand up. So we look at space and place. We also think about the fact that these places also include migration patterns. It includes our stories. It includes the work of our hands. And so we look at all of it to bring together what preservation is, and not the traditional historic lens in terms of architecture, because when they looked at the Sands community, they said it was nothing there. When they looked at the historic St. David AME Zion Church, it was overlooked. And so we know that we have a significant presence, even in the Eastville Community Historical Society, that represents all three populations on the east end of Long Island that were marginalized. The Montaukets were pushed out of Montauk, in terms their homes were being burned down. Of course, we had the enslaved people who were brought there with the settlers. We have the Indigenous that were brought there to do the work. And so when we look at these three populations, we look at the fact that they built the church. They built the AME Zion Church. All three populations are interred in our cemetery. So when we look at preservation, we look at their stories and their lives in totality, if it's available to us. We look at the work that the women have done in the community and continue. So I think it's all of what you said, plus the fact that we have to recognize that the people, if it wasn't for the people, I don't think that would be worth preserving.
Thank you. And that actually brings me into my next question for y'all. So I'm a firm believer that women have always been the backbone of local preservation movements, often starting as volunteers or in unpaid roles. Why do you think that is, and what does it cost the field?
I can go ahead and take that one. So in our Native American culture, women are the fire keepers, and we're also the storytellers. So women also held council, for the most part, instead of the men holding council. It wasn't until that westward expansion that taught a different framework that men started taking that place. And I hate to say it, but men started taking that place away from women. And so women moved into a different, a totally different position where we were just, in that respect, we were the keepers, but the keepers of the family. So I think that being able to find our place, our seat at the table, and being able to persevere and move forward with that, we are able to, find our voice again. And we need to find our voice again to be able to continue to teach our next generation so that they can do the same in moving forward. Some of the women that we have that I think have done that for us and who have pushed forward and have made their voices heard. One of them is a great supporter of Texas Tribal Buffalo Project. Her name is Winona LaDuke, and she is the founder of Honor the Earth. And so a lot of her work parallels our work as well, but just in a different capacity. Wilma Mankiller, who was also chief of the Cherokee tribe. We also have a chef, Elena Terry, from Minnesota, who also has developed programs in food sovereignty to be able to teach us those traditional foods that we no longer have or that we're not used to having, anymore as part of our culture. Native Americans have one of the highest rates of diabetes in the country because our DNA is not built for what we eat today. Our DNA was built for what our ancestors were hunting and gathering and what they were eating. So and then also there's another woman, Dawn Sherman, who is the executive director for Tonka Fund. And she is helping our community and being able to develop programs for ranchers that are preserving our bison herds so that we're able to, continue making that relationship with our four-legged relatives and being able to reconnect our people back to their culture and their tradition. So definitely I see them as being within the Native American culture, unsung heroes. And they're great role models. They're great people, great women to be able to follow in being able to follow them as role models to continue to persevere.
Thank you. I feel that there's a similar thread to Sehila with your abuela's project there.
Absolutely. And similarly, because we are also rooted in indigeneity, we very much know that women have been the culture bearers and keepers of our story. And that's why one of our primary programs that launched was called the Abuelas Project. We also launched it because those of us that are practitioners in the field, that study this in the field, were often also taught that historic preservation started with, Mount Vernon or particular stories that we know, and it was very colonized lens. So the other side to the Abuelas Project was truly recognizing that women have always carried our stories down and that we carry those stories and those memories with our own bodies and bring that forward with us. And so the other thing I want to share about women in the field and how it is that they've been the backbone, I think a lot of it too within some of the traditional framework, following colonization is that women were left to then, protect their homes. They were left to protect their communities. And so a lot of times they are the backbone of historic preservation in spaces that are living in the shadows because they're not seen within the formal practice of historic preservation. But what we know is that women continue to be that backbone and they continue to do this work. And in the work that we're doing currently throughout the borderlands, I would say about 80% of the individuals that we are conducting oral histories with that are protecting their stories or their places, 80% are women that are doing this work. So it continues, on today that we see that women are these strongholds and the leaders to protecting our stories.
Wow, that's amazing. 80%.
Mhm.
Um, Georgette, yeah, I mean, you mentioned it in your opening about showing us the picture of all the women that have supported preservation efforts in your area, but um, what would you like to add to this argument?
Well, I think when, again, I agree with my colleagues here, and I would just add not only are women the culture bearers, the keepers of the heart, but also bridge builders. We build the bridge of gender. We build the bridge of generations. We build the bridge of ethnicity. And I think that when the field discounts a lot of the work that we as women have done, it's very costly, and decades of capital have been lost in terms of creating a framework and understanding of the work that we've done. I think about the field of archaeology, how earlier on they would discount a lot of earthware and ceramics and different things like that. And there are many books out there that talks about how this is a signal that that woman could have been a woman of gentry that entertained other women. And those women that do the garden clubs, they can move mountains. If you think about the relationship between Marian Anderson and Mrs. Roosevelt. They moved mountains against the DAR, who didn't want Marian Anderson to have a concert at Constitution Hall. She ended up having an amazing integrated experience at the Lincoln Memorial with over 70,000 people attended, and it was televised. And so that was because it was a woman's work. And I do think understanding that women have been whispering on the pillows, but they've also been strategic in planning, working with communities. They've been the holder of records. They've been the holder of church records. They've been the holder of secrets as well. And so when we don't acknowledge a woman's role, we lose legitimacy as fields, and that's why now we look at these fields and try to dismantle their de jure way of segregating our worth and our voice and our value. And so I think that it's continuous, that we already know who we are. And today we have the power where it was not written, that we can still write that story. A lot of traditions have been oral and passed down. And I think that also we have to stop um, um, discounting conventional wisdom of our foremothers. Conventional wisdom is very powerful. It is proven. It is evidenced. Unfortunately, we weren't the ones writing it, but we know it. We have it. It's innate, and we're going to continue to push that envelope, forward, because today we're in a time where people don't want to hear our history. They want to discount us. Words like a woman have been banned off of some lists. So, but I don't know how that happens, because without us, there is no existence if women just close up shop and say no. So they better recognize soon, and it's Women's History Month. So they must recognize us, and we won't let them forget who we are.
Thank you. So that leads me to ask y'all, how do y'all think race, gender, and class intersect in determining whose preservation work gets resourced and legitimized?
I can jump in. Um, because our framework of historic preservation here in North America mirrored and echoed that of, um, Great Britain, it was really created on a foundation that led with this colonistic mindset. And because of that, whenever, there were different efforts, like through the study of With Heritage So Rich, and then that later was the foundation of the National Historic Preservation Act, we see a lot of those key core foundations reflected into our Historic Preservation Act. So things like the grand monuments, high architecture, it was seen as something that only architectural significance could be preserved or was worth preserving. So even the definition as to how we do this and the criteria and what it is that we look for disparage the ways that communities of color look at their own sites. In particular frameworks in different cities, I've come across issues where perhaps a certified local government doesn't see an adobe structure equal to a county courthouse, where in my mind, I can make the case that the adobe structure is much more important than the county courthouse. Um, so race plays an integral part in whose story and what sites get preserved. Absolutely. There's also, when we talk about gender as well, because preservation within the United States did begin with this nationalistic approach of celebrating what America became. Now today we're talking about the 250th, right? So because of that nationalistic point of view, you've automatically taken away the stories of so many of hundreds of thousands of individuals and their origin studies, and just selected a timeline where you're beginning. So I think that's another another way that power structures have really created this systemic marginalization when it comes down to Latinx and BIPOC communities.
And I agree with what Sehila is saying. Here in San Antonio, we have the missions here, the mission system along the San Antonio River. And those missions were built by Native Americans in this area, that were under the direction of the Jesuit, Franciscan friars in the Spanish crown. And so one good example of what she was discussing for us in respect to the Native American culture is of course the Alamo. People don't know the history of the Alamo, and then when they do find out the history of it, that it was built by Native Americans, it's kind of dismissed. It's overlooked because that's not the part of history, as you asked. It's not the part of history they want to legitimize. And I think that follows through not just with the Alamo or Mission Valero, as it was originally called, but also throughout the other mission systems. It's almost a lost history because people know that they were built and they understand when they were built, but nobody has given the credit where credit is due. So with the building of the missions also comes, that sordid history of what the Native American people in this area and throughout Texas that were brought into this area had to go through. So yes, you're looking, first mission was built in 1718 here in San Antonio. In 2026, we are still facing the same problem, as the Native Americans not receiving recognition for the work that they did in, preserving that part of history, because those missions are close to 300 years old, if not some of them are older. So.
I'll just add to, in speaking to I don't let the certified local governments get off with just pushing it off on us. We too, in our community, a certified local government is usually has submitted documentation and proof that they have this eligibility to look at the community and to determine the needs in terms of what should be preserved. And of course, that also gives that local government access to special loans or, whatever have you. And so for us in the Sands community, I feel particularly that they have a charge. Like if you look at communities where you live, you'll see like some of the best kept places are historically designated because it preserves that space, that culture. It also it does allow you to grow and to build and develop, but it's smart growth. It's in a way that doesn't erase the whole complete community. But also too, it has its negative points because a lot of people don't understand what preservation is. With us, our local laws on Long Island, in New York, on the East End, they usually have that these places can be preserved if they also have cultural significance. And so that means someone like Pyrrhus Conser, his house should have been preserved because who he is. If you look at his life, which I don't have a lot of time to go here, but basically he was born to an enslaved mother during a weird period that some people like to argue that he was free, but no, he was a product of chattel slavery, which constitute him being indentured. And how do you get indentured just by your bloodline and the color of your skin to being sold at a very young age, and then earning your freedom, going on to be the community grandfather, an entrepreneur, and philanthropist, and then his house is dismantled. If historic preservation and certified local governments worked, his house would have never come down. They would have recognized, for one, we say his homestead because this house, this place that we're trying to preserve, was basically left to him by his grandparents who were enslaved, bought their own freedom, and tried to pass this land down to their grandson, which they did, to later be torn down and not recognize the trajectory of who this man was, his family. They were noted whalers. So the story of Pyrrhus Conser, and I dropped a link to a question, you can learn more about him. So race definitely plays a part in preservation, because if it worked for us all, especially in our particular law that has cultural significance, this would tell you that this man is very significant. One, just even think about the fact that we know his first and his last name. Most enslaved persons, you will never see a first and last name. Most enslaved folks, you will not know who their mother is. You will not know who their father is, let alone their grandparents. There are so many African Americans and people who are descendants from enslavement and colonialism that cannot name their great grandparents. And here it is, a man that we can do all that for. In Southampton, we know that this man is of significance. So preservation does not work for all. We see in the register, as we said earlier, 3% is the total for BIPOC, but it's less than 2% for African Americans. So when we think about how preservation works, absolutely, race, gender, and class, caste system plays a part. In particular, women. When you see my hair braided, my hair is my ancestral heritage, where we were able to hide crops in our hair when my ancestors came. My hair is a map of escape. My hair is a map for movement. And so the fact that we have to have a Crown Act that's not signed in many states, it tells you about the value. I asked my students, I said, how much is the hair care industry? It's $1 billion industry a year surrounded on Black hair. So tell me why it is we have to fight to wear our braids, our locks, our afros, when this is $1 billion business. So when in terms of race and gender, it absolutely matters. And I'll leave you with this. Malcolm X said that the most endangered and unprotected person is the Black woman. And we see that happening all over this land, whether they are elected in terms of their, if we look in health, their education-wise. We have a woman who was elected to statewide office that they were questioning her legitimacy on experience. We have a tennis player who, and also by way of your place, Texas, Beyonce, who have had issues with childbirth, but yet what is the largest number of immortality rate of women who potentially could die because mistreatment and misdiagnosed and misrepresentation? So when you ask me about historic discrimination, I think about us, even just our bodies alone. If you look at the civil rights movement, civil rights leaders and just people who participated in the freedom rides and the sittings at the lunch counters, we have put our bodies in place to fight for our rights. And we should not have to have put our bodies in place to fight isms, but we're still doing it today. So absolutely, I see that race and gender and class intersect and have determined what people don't want to save. But again, like Maya Angelou said, I rise, I rise, I rise.
Thank you. Well, then there's also the other part, who gets to tell our stories, right? And what role does intergenerational knowledge play in our methodology? How do we protect our stories from being extracted or misrepresented?
I'll jump in with that one. To me, it's always been a problem, like for one, I identify with my Indigenous brothers and sisters. But again, I don't speak for them. The same thing with our Jewish brothers and sisters. We take notes from their page to never forget, but I don't speak for them. I know people who are LGBTQA plus, and I identify with them, but I don't speak for them. So for me, as a Black woman of enslaved heritage, I don't speak for a lot of people, but yet when it comes to our history, everybody speaks about slavery. Everybody speaks about Black culture. Everybody speaks about our music. I've even been told, although my historical society is representative of those three populations, and I'm in constant consultation, and some people may not know this, say, oh, you can't speak for, no, I can't speak for you because that is not my heritage, but I have an understanding. And so it always bewilders me, even with the Pierce concert. If you Google his name, you'll see so much come up about him. And these people have not come to one town board meeting, one village board meeting, have not fought, have not spoke up, have not written a letter, haven't sent any money to help the cause. But everybody is speaking about Pierce concert. Everybody is speaking about slavery. Everybody's speaking about civil rights. You have some of the worst people quoting Martin Luther King, and they should not even let his words come out of their mouth. So for me as a Black woman, I find it very upsetting that where other populations have benefited from the civil rights movement, as I said early, from us putting ourselves in harm's way, kind of gets usurped, including our culture that we've created. You see it immolated in many places. So it's very disturbing to me when you have a lot of populations that, why don't you write about your own history? Why don't you write about slavery? Because that's not my history. My history is how I survived it. Why don't you write about the KKK? Do that. Why do you have to write about slavery? And these are people who are insensitive. And one of the things that I have been prominent in doing in this region and in New York is teaching cultural competency. I don't want to be re-traumatized by their work when they say Negro, where they say slave. No, this is not the language that I subscribe to. So cultural competency has been my way to move past all of this because, again, I can't stop people from speaking about things that they really will never know about, things they have never felt. I can't stop them from speaking about it. So my best way is to teach them what I do think is possible in us really trying to really understand each other beyond just having our food days where we understand everybody through food. How do we go beyond the surface of understanding who we are? And there is nothing wrong. I don't like the word ally. I don't want to be your ally. I would rather be your co-conspirator and be in the fight with you, your co-designer helping you change, your co-developed person. I don't want to be any allies because what I found is that allies speak up when it's nice to them, but then when it's time to get dirty and their hands in the mud, they disappear. And so it does a disservice to us to have people speak about a history that they will not continue to fight for today. The fact that books are being banned today, the fact that our bodies are the subject of people who could never have a monthly and never understand the pain of pushing out a baby. So for me, we can't stop it, but you can teach against it, and you could teach it to be you authentically. And that's all I do is make sure that whatever I'm speaking about is authentic. And again, we do need each other. I believe that we are better together, everyone. But the only way we're going to be better together is that we understand each other's plights and speak from their voice and not what we think, from what they say, from what they are okay with us saying. And that's the only way we can move forward because our story has been co-opted, our culture has been co-opted, and it's worldwide. It's not just in the United States. It's worldwide. So, they used to say that the best form of flattery is copying it. And so that's what we see. But unfortunately, people copy it, but they're not ready to stand in our shoes.
Yes, thank you. Before we move on, I'm going to let our guests answer, but we do, if you feel free to use the Q&A feature if you have any questions for our speakers. Izel, Sehila, do y'all have anything to add to this before we move on?
Yeah, I just want to say I absolutely agree. We believe in co-envisioning and co-creating in our work. I am a historian and I am also a historic preservationist. So wearing both hats, sometimes is a very interesting lens in that as a historian, I know that so many of the histories that were documented were not written by Latinos. They were not studied by Latinos and not provided through a lived experience. It was more so of like a top-down approach. So one of the things that we do within our own methodology is we really believe in, like I said, a community-led preservation work. So as we're going through, we're not writing the stories, for people. We help share their own stories and their own words. Within our own oral history projects, we really believe in not to be extractive in our work or how we're doing it. We are not there to take. We're there to help support them. We're there to help elevate them and never want any type of misrepresentation. So what we do is whether we have your documentation via an oral history or a transcript, or perhaps it's in one of our GIS story maps, we sign an agreement, a partner agreement between it, and it's very short, very clear, but basically saying, if ever you want this story taken down, or your family wants this story taken down, or if you want to change it, that's totally fine. We will take it down for you. We will change it as needed. And that's a way that we know that we're beginning to change that narrative and to tell the story through lived experience from those who actually experienced rather than an academic writing about it or an outsider writing about it. Um, so we really believe that this is a lot on building trust and creating trust and knowing that each person has their own voice. And while I'm a historian and a historic preservationist, I'm there to support them to tell their own story through whatever platforms that it is that they want to tell it through.
Yes, and I completely agree with what Dr. Grier-Key and Sehila have spoken on. I believe for us and what we try to do with our programs is not only to reconnect our Native American Indigenous community members to our culture and traditions, but also to be able to teach other cultures our traditions so that they're a little bit more understanding of what they see. And also so that they can, how can I say it? So that they have a better understanding also, so that judgment isn't so easily passed. Coming from a Native American culture, a lot of people still think Native Americans live in teepees. We hear so many times, I didn't know bison were still around, just different things like that. And then not only that, but we do have different customs and traditions, and not just in our life ways and our food ways, but also in our customs, our dress, attire. Native American women wear ribbon skirts that have a very significant meaning to us. And so a lot of them don't like to wear them out in public because they don't want to be culturally appropriated. So it's just being able to teach other cultures and other community members the significance and the importance of what our customs and our traditions are. I feel that makes the difference. It's just them being able to understand a little bit more than what history has taught them.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say too, I agree, but I also wanted to say that what I say is my opinion and do not hold it. I'm giving a disclaimer to the organizers of this call, as I could be a little bit rambunctious. I am an activist, but I did just want to say that again, my opinions are individual and not to the organizers of these events. And I still wouldn't take it back. I just wanted to let the viewers know.
Thank you. Right now, I want to pause to see if we have any questions from the audience. Noah, do we have any questions? Okay, well, that leads to my next question, because I still have lots of questions for y'all. So each of you works within a tradition that understands heritage as relational, not just buildings or records, but living connections to ancestors, kin, and the land itself. The Buffalo Nation, the abuelas, the elders and freedom seekers of the East End. What does that relational understanding mean within your own community's framework? And as we look toward a future where we build across communities collectively, how do we honor what is shared without flattening what is distinct or what makes us unique?
That's a great question. The one thing that we do is we really challenge individuals to look beyond the structure, history, and because, our sites are typically the first ones to come down via, redlining, urban renewal, um, even, today for, to build multi-million condos, a lot of that has then taken away the physical fabric of what our heritage is. And so we're left to have to really look through the lens of a cultural landscape and understand that our own heritage sometimes isn't reflected in the built environment. And that's okay. It doesn't have to be, because our heritage and our culture expands so much more than that building. And I think that that's one of the biggest limitations in the framework of historic preservation today. when it comes to Latinx and BIPOC communities. And so that relationship comes with place and space. Sometimes we carry it in us through our own migration patterns. I myself, my people come from Oaxaca, and I have migrated here as first gen, but yet I carry those lands with me everywhere that I go. Um, so the understanding of whenever we're thinking about this relational understanding, it's something that I really see as being fluid and something that we carry with us, whether it's in the physical fabric or not. As a practitioner, I also know that there are so many other elements that come into play whenever it is that we are assessing what is significant in a site as well. And so I pull from a lot of various types of disciplines to be able to practice the methods that we practice at Latinos and Heritage Conservation.
Yeah, and I will add that for us, it's so, like you said, creating, for us, one of the projects that I will uplift is the return of the Amistad replica ship into Montauk. And so, I think Dr. Maria de Longoria is on this call. And one of the things that she does, which is so powerful for us, she opens up the event with the libation ceremony. And we're also able to say the names of our ancestors and our elders that came before us. And it's really important to connect with them. And so that's been providing an experience. Like if you ever come to one of these events, you'll see that you are actually walking through a forest of terrain to get down to a beach. You're actually walking in the steps that they actually walked in. You're on the beach that they actually ran aground in foreign land. So providing an experience where it's not performative, but it's authentic, that you are quiet, you understand exactly what they had to go through. And then you look around, as you said, the McMansions that have been built that displace communities um, that are all empty because people come there maybe 1 or 2 years out of the summer, 2 months, 1 or 2 months out of the summer. And so being able to take them back in time, not some people will get traumatized just thinking about what they had to endure on that ship. That can be traumatizing, but also just allowing them to be in that space. And we always have a space for people to fill and to talk them through. We have people that were able to sit with people who actually get lost in those feelings. So it's important for us to have place-based history, but also to see ourselves in the built environment. And this is why we're working so hard to rebuild the Paris Concert site. This is why we work so hard to preserve our campus with our different buildings on it, because it's important for you to see yourself. There's a saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so as long as we erase the enduring legacies of our elders and ancestors who were builders, who were, the top echelon of society, architects of society, and engineers. So I think it's important for us to provide that space where they can actually walk back in time with it. But as you said, it's really important not to be performative. So that's one of the biggest things that I try to take away with not being performative, so that it is a distinct experience, regardless to how our history is being usurped. They can't do that because they don't know what it is, and they'll never understand the innate feeling of that. So it could be duplicated if they want, but it will never be an authentic experience.
I think for Texas Travel Buffalo Project, being a woman-led organization puts us at the forefront in being able to lead others within our community. We do work with men. So in our organization, we have men that work right alongside us, and they're very, they allow us the time and the space that women need sometimes to be able to organize and lead and move forward in our own way, and they respect that. And we are very appreciative of them for that. But it's in developing our programs designed for women leaders and being able to give other community members, other women within our community, that opportunity to lead as well, and to learn and to gain the knowledge that we need to move our future generations forward. You know, the old saying, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. And so some of our programs, such as Meat for Mamas, is developing in that way. You know, we're able to provide them with meat to feed their families, but we're also able to provide them with knowledge of our culture, knowledge of our traditions. We provide them with recipes, you know, support from other local organizations, and support from our own team members and our own staff, in being able to help them move their families forward in a better way and be able to teach their children, you know, the same traditions and knowledge that we have. So I think for us, that's what we base a lot of it off of, in being able to build across our communities, is being able to move them forward in a good balanced way.
Thank y'all. And we do have one question from the audience. Madeline would like to know, how do you engage youth in your work, and why is it important?
I can go ahead and start with that if that's okay. So we engage youth through, as I had mentioned earlier, our youth camps. We have our elders come in. We also have other community members that come in, and we sit down and teach them a lot of our knowledge and traditions that have been passed on through oral history or passed on from other nations and tribes. We also have some elders that come in from Oklahoma who are members of the Kiowa and Comanche tribes, who come in and also who help teach their traditions as well. And we also engage youth in being able to offer them that curriculum that that's being developed right now. A lot of it, the curriculum is based K through 12, and it's based off of regenerative agriculture, sustainable ranching, and is also based off of Teak's traditional ecological knowledge. And so we're able to move them forward, we feel, in a good way, and then being able to have a solid foundation or a good start to move forward. We have some youth that are interested in becoming bison ranchers. And so we're, you know, we always try to open that door and being able to be supportive to them so that they are able to move forward with their own goals and their own dreams. So, but yeah, we even have other partners. As I had mentioned, Tonka Fund is one of our partners that also helps. You know, our interested youth that come to us, we're able to move them forward to Tonka Fund as well, so that they can gain support from them as well. So there's other organizations within our own community that help us when it comes to our youth programs.
And I can jump in too and say our greatest avenue to the next generation is contemporary art, it seems. Because a lot of the times our stories are either not written or captured, or if you do find something written, there's no description. For instance, there's a local artist, Michael A. Butler. There was a Freedom Seeker ad. And from that, if you look at Freedom Seekers ad, it's very descriptive of, you know, what they're saying, down to the color of their clothes. And he had a limp. And so we have been able to preserve our history through the arts. And I would say that the next generation found us, and we are so grateful that they found us, and we've done some amazing work with them, which is also building our collection. So I would say, even if we're a historic site and historic space, We do preservation and we do conservation, but we also do art. A part of our community has been a safe haven for artists. By the, many names you would know have come to the East End as respite in the 20s, as early as the 20s for our community. So we've always been a community of creatives. And so look into your archives, see what kind of fun programs that you can do. It's not always the talking heads that get people in. Sometimes it's a scoop and paint. That's something that's been positive. The kids like Cookie Monster ice cream. So we've done a scoop and paint, and that was the first time I've ever tasted Cookie Monster ice cream. And I'm not supposed to have it, but it was delicious. So I say also let's do the fun work, because I think that our resistance is joy, right? The best way for us to continue to survive and thrive is to not let anyone steal that joy. So I'd encourage people who are interested in bringing in young people to do the fun stuff too that ties to your mission.
Sehila, do you have anything to add, or are we?
I just want to say that LHC, because it's a part of our mission, it's ingrained in everything that we do. And I'll just quickly share, as of recent, we became accredited here in Texas to be able to do teacher workshops. And so we're doing teacher workshops throughout the state and now through the borderlands. So that way then teachers can take their students outside of the book and actually be within, a historic abandoned Mexican cemetery, or go to, the little local tiendita to see exactly how that 20th century community thrived during that time. We also do really fun workshops centered around cultural practices like papel picado, teaching, the origins of where that came from and how it is that we carry this tradition today in a more contemporary way. So we teach about history, the origin of it, and then how they can continue that practice. But I'll just stop there.
Thank you. Well, and that brings us to the end of our webinar. I want to thank Dr. Georgette Grier-Key, Sehila Mota Casper, and Izel Lopez for the generosity of this conversation. What you have shared today is not just important, it's necessary. This is exactly the kind of reckoning the field of historic preservation needs, and I'm grateful that you trusted us to hold it. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. The recording of this webinar will be shared in the coming days. On behalf of the Monuments Toolkit at World Heritage USA, ICOMOS USA, thank you. Take care of yourselves and of the places that matter.
Thank you all.
Thank you. You'll have a great day.
Thank you.